Minister Conor Burns joins me in the studio now, the former Northern Ireland Minister and the Tory MP for Bournemouth West. Lovely to see you this morning. Thank you for coming in. What's your reaction to the Natalie Elphicke defection?
Amusement.
Yes.
I think it actually speaks to something. We all knew where Natalie's politics were. They were on the right of the Conservative Party. And I think this speaks to something that the public sense, and it's shown a little bit when you look at Keir Starmer's ratings. Labour are getting a lot of support because they're not us right now. But there's a sense they don't stand for very much. And I think the fact that Starmer is comfortable, or appears to be comfortable, or is presenting as comfortable, welcoming Natalie Elphicke in, speaks almost to a sort of sense that there is no value, no principle, no guiding stars within the Keir Starmer Labour Party.
Although when she criticised the Prime Minister in her resignation statement, she talked about his incompetence, his inability to stop the boats, basically suggesting that the Conservative Party is sort of dying on its knees. That's probably a fair assessment. I mean, looking at the numbers still coming in, it was that record of 711 people coming in by boat illegally the Wednesday before last. That 5-point plan of Rishi Sunak's isn't working, is it?
So, look, I think what she said in terms of frustration about the boat situation is widely echoed. I think if you ask the Prime Minister himself, we are very frustrated at the inability to close off those options. We're very frustrated at the behaviour of people who are moving through multiple safe countries to come to the UK to claim asylum when you'd think they'd want to do that in the first safe country they came to. If you, for example, stood on the beach of Dover and said women and children first, you get a pretty thin reception. Many of these are economic migrants. But where Natalie was right, certainly 3 weeks ago, was in her analysis that Labour have no solution to this. So whilst Rwanda is not the silver bullet, I think we all accept that, it is something that will act as a deterrent. So if you don't believe the Conservatives on that, you could listen to the new Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary in the Irish Republic, who are saying that migrants are going there because of the deterrent effect of Rwanda. All the stuff that Natalie stood listening to with Sir Keir Starmer in Dover at the end of last week, we're already doing. Collaboration with the French, breaking the gangs, intelligence gathering.
The deterrent effect, though, maybe it won't take effect until it's too late for the Tories. This is the other problem. You've got a situation where we had George Eustace in earlier. I know you spoke to him in the Green Room. You know, he's decided, along with 64 others, we heard from Nadeem Zahawi last week, that he's standing down. They're all doing it for their own different reasons. And he made the point that in 2019 you had a lot of people resigning as well. But it doesn't exactly evoke sort of confidence in the Conservative Party. It's a bad look. You know, you're staying. You're going to fight your seat. What's your majority?
It's 10,100.
Are you worried about it?
I'm
worried
campaigning
about
extremely strongly. Look, I told my first political fib in 1986 when you had to be 16 to join the Conservative Party and I was 14. So I told them I was 16 to get in. That was back in Welland, Hatfield, St Albans, where I was at school. I've seen it come and go. There are cycles in politics, but you keep fighting. And a number of colleagues are making decisions, what's right for them, their families, their careers. Many who've reached the top in, or near the top in government, are taking the calculation that they've done that. They want to do something different. I'm staying because I think those of us who have been involved for a long time have an obligation to stay and fight. And we've seen electoral surprises. Yes, we're behind. I think it is as wrong for Conservatives to assume that the public cannot be persuaded to support us, as it is arrogant for Labour to assume already that they're going to support them. We haven't even begun an election campaign. Take one example that you've raised several times this morning. The plans that the Labour Party have for VAT on private schools and the change to charitable status. I went to a private school. It was a modest private school. Lots of the parents made sacrifices. It was a school run by the Brothers of the Sacred Heart in St Albans. Many parents who are making sacrifices for their kids will be looking at Labour's plans with some anxiety.
Yes.
That's one of the few areas where Labour have actually started to spell out what they do. I think when you get into a campaign and they're actually compelled to tell us what their plan for government is, things could open up.
But then you need effective campaigners on the campaign trail giving the counter narrative, and the criticism of the current government is they're not landing these blows kind of cleanly enough. They're not sustaining their attack lines. You know, they watered down the net zero pledge and then it's on to the next thing and the next thing. You work very closely with Boris Johnson. Give us some insight. Is he going to come back onto the campaign trail? Has he got an appetite for a return to politics? I know you speak to him regularly. What's he saying?
Well, listen, before we do Boris, I mean, look, I go back a couple of years. I do house meetings in my constituency a couple of times a week with just ordinary folk coming to someone's home and talking to me. 2 years ago, after the Truss circus tent fell in on the Conservative Party after 49 days, the criticism was that we were incompetent, we didn't know what we were doing. There is now talk about what we are doing, and maybe it's a bit technocratic. That's a vast improvement of where we were 2 years ago. There's a challenge for the Prime Minister and the whole parliamentary party to explain what we've done in government. Take, for example, schools, where 90% of schools are now good or outstanding compared to 60% roughly under Labour a decade and a half ago. We've got to do that. We've got to be outselling the narrative about the choice that there will be at the next election. If it's a referendum on any government that's at the end of its time, that's going to be challenging. If you can turn it into a debate about who's got the right vision for the future of Britain, I think Keir Starmer will fall short on that. Look, to Boris, we're going to need all our talents. We're going to need all our players, all our stars on the field. Boris is doing amazing work on Ukraine currently, which is extremely important beyond the days in and out flows of day-to-day politics. What's going on in Ukraine? If we let Ukraine down and Putin wins, the risk to us in the years, decades ahead is immense. Boris is rallying support. I nearly saw him a couple of weeks ago in New York, where he was rallying the American Republicans on this, trying to get them to see the strategic importance of this. I hope a role will be found for Boris in that election campaign.
And there's been talk that he's waiting for a phone call from Rishi Sunak. Do you think that phone call is going to be made? Because there's no love lost there, is there? Boris Johnson still blames Rishi Sunak in part for his own demise.
Boris has an analysis of what happened, and I think...
That's his analysis, isn't it?
I think a lot of people now look back on that period and realise that people were out to get Boris from day one. A lot of people never forgave Boris for the fact that Leave won the referendum. And Boris sort of lent permission to the sort of liberal mainstream opinion that it was okay to be in favour of national sovereignty. And they were determined to get him. They got him. But he is still out there, a big beast in the Tory party. And I want to see all our players on the field.
Do you think he wants to be back on the field of play? Notwithstanding what that might mean for people playing rugby with him, but metaphorically speaking.
Anyone who's ever been out on a walkabout, or in fact just walking between meetings with Boris Johnson, sees he's a superstar. Yeah. And we need that. And that
but
mandate...
what's he saying to you, Conor? Does he want to do it? That's what I'm trying to drill into here.
He said it himself. The mandate of 2019, in very many ways, was a very personal mandate. He still feels very strongly about levelling up. He feels very strongly about making sure we take the full benefits of Brexit. And I think he will, he was not exactly complimentary in many of their dispatch box exchange to Sir Softy, Captain Hindsight, whatever the various things he called him. I think he would relish the opportunity to play a part in making sure that Keir Starmer doesn't get to number 10.
All right, so you're indicating that he may have, the mood music may be positive on a Boris comeback for the campaign.
Well, you never know from one day to the next what view Boris will take.
Indeed.
I hope, as someone whose name will be on a ballot paper in the autumn, that we get all our stars, including Boris, on the pitch.
All right, so you have had regular conversations. I'm just trying to drill into this because people are being very coy about this. How often do you speak to him? When's the last time you spoke to him? And is this often a topic of the conversation?
Well, so I nearly saw him in New York a couple of weeks ago, but our diaries didn't actually work. Okay. He wants to play a part, but he's very proud of what
he needs this call.
But he's very proud of what he's doing on Ukraine. That's the one thing that I think he feels during his time in government that he called it right, and he led and coalesced national and international opinion around the need to stand with the Ukrainians against Putin's illegal invasion, and he's doing that in the States and elsewhere.
But if he came out on the stump with you in Bournemouth West, do you think he'd be an electoral asset? Would it help to convince people on the doorstep?
He's brought up in various parts of my constituency positively as someone who had a great vision for Britain.